America is the greatest and strongest country in the world. But this is not enough to bring about peace and stability, because the United States has to convince foes and friends alike that not only it has this might, but it has the will to use this might.
What is the astonishing, astounding, historic comeback of Donald Trump mean for U.S.-Israeli relations, for Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, for our war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, for our showdown head-to-head with the Iranian regime in Tehran that has fired more than 500 ballistic missiles, suicide drones, and cruise missiles at Israel just in 2024. And the supreme leader is vowing to do another major attack now that the American elections are over. Those are the questions we want to look at today on Inside the Epicenter. Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg in Jerusalem. I'm the founder, with my wife Lynn, of the Joshua Fund. And the Joshua Fund is a ministry, as most of you who are already listening to Inside the Epicenter know, to educate and mobilize Christians to bless Israel and her neighbors according to the Abrahamic covenant. Genesis 12, 1 through 3, where God says that he will bless those who bless Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel, and the nation of Israel. And he will curse those who curse us. We're seeing a lot of people cursing us in this part of the world. And this podcast is part of the educational mission of the Joshua Fund to help Christians and others, Jews, Muslims, anybody else, all over the world to understand better what's happening in Israel, what it means. And of course, we do this as evangelical Christians from a biblical worldview. So for those who are interested, that's what we do. Welcome. And I want to welcome our special guest today, my friend Danny Ione. Danny, first of all, Ambassador Danny Ione, thank you so much for joining us on Inside the Epicenter.
Absolutely, Joel. It's my pleasure to be with you and with Lynn and the Joshua Fund. Just go from strength to strength.
Thank you. Well, it's great to have you. And let me give people a little context. So Danny Ione was a member of Knesset for many, many years. He was the Israeli ambassador to the United States. That's when he and I and Lynn and Danny's wife, Ann, originally met. He was the actual sitting ambassador in Washington, and we were invited to a reception. And it was started at the beginning of a very wonderful friendship. Danny went on to be in a number of positions, but probably maybe the most prominent one was as deputy foreign minister for the state of Israel. And now he's in private equity and venture capital and in business, as well as obviously speaking out a lot on help in the media and helping tell the truth about Israel. That's one of the projects he does, something called The Truth About Israel. And so, Danny, very few people know the nuances of U.S.-Israel relations like a former ambassador from Israel to the United States. It's a complex environment. Yes, the good news is Americans, and the American government tend to love Israel, but that doesn't mean the relationship is easy. So it's been complicated over the last 4 years. But as we look ahead, let's just start with your reaction to what's the first couple of things that come to mind about how the U.S.-Israel relationship will change, if you think it will change, with Donald Trump coming back in as president of the United States and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance coming in as the vice president.
Well, Joel, as you well know, living here in Israel, that there was a great enthusiasm here with when we learned the news about. Actually, we were all here glued to the Fox News updates all night, and Israel, I think, is one of the very few countries in the world who had an overwhelming majority, actually 3-1, like 80% to more than actually 80 to 20, maybe 4-1, favoring Trump over his opponents. So, of course, there is a great deal of hope now. And his record in his first term was wonderful. I believe that what he achieved, nobody else did. And in his 4 years in office, from 2017 to 2021, he moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel, just as it is prescribed in the Bible. And he also recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. He also defended Israel. This is not very much told, but he defended Israel really tenaciously in the international arena against the all the condemnations, all the bias against Israel, all this nefarious, what we call the political warfare that Palestinians and the Iranians and radical Muslims lodged on us, whether it was in the UN Security Council or UNESCO, other organizations, human rights. And of course, this was very much appreciated because when the United States supports Israel, the Europeans follow suit because everybody is looking at Washington as not just the beacon of hope, but also a place of strength, I would say, of decency. And when the U.S. supports Israel, everyone else, at least, hold their attacks. And of course, his maximum pressure policy on Iran, I believe, was going to yield great fruits, except that unfortunately in 2020, he wasn't elected. But now I guess history is giving us a second chance. Not many times history is so tolerant, but this time, or forgiving, but this time they are giving us a second chance. And we really look forward to a great, renew the great relationship with Trump, with his administration, and working together because there are no better allies than Israel and the United States, really natural allies, that an alliance which is based on our values, Judeo-Christian values, and of course interests. Your enemies are our enemies. American friends are our friends. So we really look forward to a great time of peace and security and stability and prosperity in the Middle East.
So let me just note to those who are regular listeners and viewers of Inside the Epicenter and those who are new, the Joshua Fund, which, produces this podcast, is a non-profit organization. That means we're a nonpartisan organization. So we're having this conversation after the elections. I just want to be clear with everyone because the Joshua Fund doesn't take a partisan position. We didn't endorse a candidate in the American presidential elections or the Israeli elections or in any elections. We're giving analysis on this program. If Kamala Harris had won, we would be talking about, okay, what are the implications of that? But so, Ambassador Danny Ione, you gave a good, very robust, detailed analysis of why Israelis were so positive. I don't know that there's any country in the world, I think you alluded to, that where there'd be such a strong support for Donald Trump as opposed to either a neutral position or possibly somebody on the left or like Kamala Harris. I didn't see an 80-20 split, but I did see the most recent, the last poll that I saw that was on Channel 12 just about a week before the election was that 66% of Israelis supported Trump, only 17% supported Kamala Harris. And that's, nearly a 50-point split. So your point is well taken. It wasn't 51-49. We like this person a little bit more than that person. No, it's been decisive. So there has been a lot of relief and encouragement here because they believe Donald Trump, whatever else they believe about him, whatever tweet or speech or things that he says, they believe that if they saw 4 years of him being really, truly pro-Israel, and they're grateful. So now the question is, let's go back to the question, which is, what are the first few things that you are looking for that would be different, or, it may not be different, but I mean, what are you looking for specifically Trump to do in the first year, let's say, even maybe the first 6 months of the Trump administration that will affect Israel, Iran, and the Arab world?
Well, I would say, Joel, first and foremost, to show strength. America is the greatest and strongest country in the world. But this is not enough to bring about peace and stability because the United States has to convince foes and friends alike that not only it has this might, but it has the will to use this might. And again, here we are, myself, bipartisan because, we respect the will and the choice of the American people. But I'm trying here, as you say, analytically, to make the comparison based on the facts. And the facts were that during the last 4 years, the United States of America could not deter Russia from invading into the Ukraine, could not actually deter Iran and all its proxies to attack Israel, 7th of October, and later on, even Iran joining the war against Israel. And also I would say the way of the United States departing Afghanistan, actually leaving behind true allies of the United States to their own fate, did not really, I would say, drill in confidence in the United States. Hence, we saw a lot of instability in the world. We saw how China is becoming more bold in the South China Sea. And here in the Middle East, we have seen how deterrence was shattered on the 7th of October last year with this massacre, with this really slaughter of Hamas, which is like ISIS. There's no difference whatsoever. So I would say that by changing the view of the world, that the United States means business will go. I think this will be a great deal to bring back stability. And then
let's stop there for just a second. So part of that, of course, is rebuilding the military. Part of that, which is what Trump was doing in the first 4 years of administration. It hasn't gone so well over the last 4, so there's going to have to be a tension there. Plus, the U.S. has been supplying a lot of weapons to Israel and to Ukraine, and there's concern, particularly by now Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, that the United States doesn't have the industrial military factories and systems in place to produce enough weaponry, not only for Israel and Taiwan, by the way, but also Ukraine and for America. So a lot of that has to be done. I think that would be consistent with what you're saying, reasserting sort of America first strength. The other side, of course, we're getting the economy, roaring again. You're seeing the stock market react very positively just in the early days of Trump winning. But I think there's a couple things I want to ask you specifically about then, which is my sources and what I'm sort of reading is that Trump's people, but I think it's Trump, is signaling to Netanyahu, get these wars done. Like, I want to come in on January 20th and say, I'm ending wars. I'm not starting new ones. So I want you to win, Bibi, in Gaza, and you're close, so finish it. Right? Get your hostages back, finish off Hamas, and be done. You're 80% of the way of destroying all the missiles in the Hezbollah arsenal in Lebanon. You've taken out the top 18 of the top 18 leaders. You've neutralized another 4,000. So finish. Do what you got to do. I'm not going to interfere, but finish. And then I don't know what he's saying about Iran, but I think this is a big deal that, if I'm right, that Trump is totally with Israel and he's totally with Netanyahu, but he has a timeline. You got about 2 months, 2.5 maybe, and that's it. I need the stage clear when I come on it, because I think the next thing is Trump's going to finish the deal between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States that Biden tried for 3 years to do and could not get done. What do you think about that analysis? And then what else do you think we should be watching for? Because you may disagree. And Danny, you and I love each other. We've known each other for a long time. Just play it straight.
No, you happen to be right, like you usually are. And these are the messages from Trump to Netanyahu. By the way, this is not at all against Netanyahu's will or wishes. Our interest is the same, to finish the war, but to finish the war on our terms after we have been attacked so brutally and unprovokingly. So I believe that with Trump understanding that there should be a clear victory both in Gaza and in Lebanon over the Hezbollah, that Israel should finish the job. And that means not to put the constraints like we have seen before on issues of what is called humanitarian supply to the Palestinians in Gaza, which Hamas basically looted and made money out of it. And actually, this prolonged the war. You cannot fight a war, an existential war, when with one hand tied behind your back. And I think here we see that with Trump, he frees our hands. So I believe that 2.5 months or even less than that should be enough if we are allowed to do what needs to be done. And Joel, you know that the Israeli military, IDF, probably is the most effective in the world, and also making sure that no civilians would be hurt. Unfortunately, this is becoming increasingly more difficult as Hamas is using its civilians as human fields. Even so, we're trying to be very pinpointed in our operations. But I believe that in this frame of time that you mentioned, this can be done both in Lebanon vis-a-vis the Hezbollah and with Hamas. And then the next stage, we should work together.
Yeah. Okay. Hold that thought. When we come back, let's talk about how you think Trump is going to talk about how to deal with Iran with Netanyahu, and also the Saudis. I think that's really important, and any other issue that you think, even with limited time. We'll be back with this episode, this election analysis episode of Inside the Epicenter. I'm Joel Rosenberg. I'm with former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Danny Ione. We'll be back on Inside the Epicenter right after this. Before we go back to our guest ambassador, Danny Ione, let me just read a short passage from Daniel, the book of Daniel in the Jewish scriptures, in the Hebrew scriptures, Daniel chapter 2, because I want to speak to those of you who may not have been big fans of Donald Trump. In fact, you may have been opponents of Donald Trump, or you're for him. Either way, again, I just reiterate what I said the first half of the podcast. The Joshua Fund, which runs this podcast, produces it. We're nonpartisan, nonprofit. We don't take a position. We can all have our own personal views, but the point is that's not what the Joshua Fund does. But it's important to know this passage of scripture. It's very, very interesting. God is speaking through the Hebrew prophet Daniel. Daniel was living under the wicked Babylonian Empire at the time. And it's interesting because verse 19 of chapter 2 begins, "Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven, and Daniel said, 'Let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. It is he, God, who changes the times and the epochs. He removes kings and he establishes or raises up kings, and he gives wisdom to wise men.'" Welcome back to Inside the Epicenter. I'm Joel Rosenberg, founder and chairman of the Joshua Fund, and this is part of our educational mission. This podcast, we've been doing this only for about 3 years, but after October 7th, this just surged in interest. Inside the Epicenter is now in the top 1.5% of all podcasts in the world. It just shows the hunger there is for credible and even long-form conversations about people who really know what's happening in the Middle East, in Israel, in the Arab Muslim world, both geopolitically, economically, militarily, as well as spiritually. So that's a very interesting passage, Daniel chapter 2, verses 19 through 21, because God is telling the Hebrew prophet himself, Daniel, listen, you're living under a king that you would not have chosen, but God is sovereign over this. God raises up kings and God removes kings. So just trust that. And God is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So as long as you keep your eyes and your relationship on him, you'll be fine, even if life is hard under a kingdom or a regime that you don't want. I'm not saying that I don't want Donald Trump or not. I'm just saying I want people to keep in mind God is sovereign over these things. And that should give us hope and encouragement regardless of our political persuasion. So I want you to also, as a prayer request, be praying for President Biden and Vice President Harris as they wrap up their administration, that they would wrap it up well with decency, strength, and class as they step out of power peacefully. Pray for President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance as they gear up, as they have to staff their cabinet, their White House staff, their national security team, and so forth, and make decisions of how to put all of their campaign promises into motion. That is not an easy thing to do. And what they do is going to have a big impact on the security, prosperity, and hope or lack thereof of Israelis, Lebanese, Palestinians, Iranians, and others throughout the region. Okay, Danny, What do you think Donald Trump is saying to Bibi Netanyahu? They've known each other for a long time. They worked well together during the 4 years, most of those 4 years of the Trump administration, though we learned afterwards that Trump was actually quite angry at Netanyahu for some of the things that happened behind the scenes. I can't and won't use the language that Donald Trump used to describe Benjamin Netanyahu to an Israeli reporter on the record, actually on a recording for a book that writer was doing. But they seem to patch things up. Things seem to be good now. They've had multiple conversations. They met, of course, at Mar-a-Lago a few months back. So, yeah, is Trump giving Benjamin Netanyahu a green light to go do what you got to do to take out the Iranian regime or the nuclear reactors? Or do you think Trump is saying, listen, take care of Hezbollah and Hamas, but let's work together on a massive maximum pressure campaign. Give me some space. Don't go start something bigger right now. Or is there some other scenario that you think maybe is more realistic?
Yeah. Well, Josh, first of all, let me say that I completely endorse what you have said about being bipartisan, not going into politics. I appreciate the fact that Joshua Fund is non-political, and this is very good. Here in Israel also, we would like to enjoy bipartisan support. We have always done that.
Well, there's not just two, right? We have to be like I don't know what 30 different parties or whatever, 10 different parties. We have to.
That's
but
right.
You're right, nonpartisan. So I guess that would be translating.
So anyway, what you mentioned about maybe a little bit souring relationship between Trump and Netanyahu when Trump was out of power, I think this is just water under the bridge. And as strategic partners, they will work together to achieve our objectives, goals. Israel's goals are the same as the United States and vice versa. So when we talk about Iran is the major one, I would say, single-handedly, the most dangerous problem we have in the world today, not just in the Middle East, not just for Israel, but throughout the Sunni Arab world and beyond the Middle East. And we see it not only because of its nuclear ambitions, but also their build this huge apparatus of delivery systems, long-range ballistic missiles. This is very, very bad. Of course, the fact that they have financed, supported, inspired all terror organizations in the Middle East to attack Israel and the United States' interests, this is also something which is we have to stop. Without Iran.
And let's make sure we make it clear. I probably should have put this at the beginning of the podcast. The supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, sent assassins to the United States to try to assassinate Donald Trump in particular. Now, two other people tried to assassinate him before the Iranians got there and tried to pull off their deal. But we know from the FBI and intelligence sources that Iran has been trying, and Iran tried to kill Netanyahu also. So this is a big deal. I think Donald Trump will take that personally.
And he should. Actually, these Ayatollahs, this most radical Islamist regime in Tehran is a dangerous one, not only to the world, but also to their own people. And I don't think they represent really the interests of their people. Actually, last time we saw in the elections, only 20% of Iranians participated. And they would very much like to see a different regime, different lifestyle. So I would say that as I understand and know President-elect Trump, he is a businessman in the core and making deals. And the art of the deal, he would like first to give Iran a chance to cut a deal which would be a reasonable one, not just the one in 2015 that Obama signed, but a different one, which will be more robust in terms of limiting Iranians' capabilities to, let's say, surreptitiously go around the deal. So it's with a very viable monitoring technique without the sunset clause. That means that at the end of the deal, which actually is in 2025, next year, according to the original deal of 2015, that after 10 years, they're free to go to do whatever they want. So I think first and foremost, there would be an offer for a deal. If the Iranians do not take the deal, then I believe we will resort back to the maximum pressure. And Iran is a very vulnerable country economically. And if we see, so I think this would be the path, which also Netanyahu would go with Trump all the way. By the way, you know, the Iranians regime, they call the United States the big Satan, and we are Israel the little Satan.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So your sense, just to summarize it, is you think Trump is probably telling Netanyahu, I'd prefer if you didn't do some big massive attack unless you're attacked. If you're not attacked between now and January 20th, why don't you guys just deal with Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south? That's enough for you guys to deal with. Know that I'm going to resupply you with weapons, with missile interceptors. We're going to get that all taken care of. But let me then, give an ultimatum to the Iranian regime. Let's try to not have a whole new larger war. That's your basically what you're saying?
That's my assessment. And the only, I would say, stipulations are, as you mentioned, if Israel is attacked again by Iran, then I think no punches. We will pull no punches, and we'll have to do what we need to do in terms of self-defense, which would actually rid the entire Middle East from a very nefarious regime here. Also, another possibility, there are two ways I believe that we can go over to a military operation with Iran. One, as I mentioned, if Iran attacks Israel again. The second one is if Iran will try to break through to nuclear capabilities. They're very close, but they have not they are not yet possessing nuclear bombs or nuclear device. But if we will see that they make a run to it, then a preemptive attack will be not only necessary, but it will be just inevitable.
Yeah. You may be right, and my instinct is that you're more likely to be right because Trump is a negotiator, as you said. You really put that very well. But I will say, here's my one caution, and then I want to ask you very fast about the Saudis, and then we'll have to wrap. And I appreciate your time so much. I value it greatly. My only caution or concern, let's say, about the art of the deal scenario, Bibi, don't do anything now. Give me time. Time has not worked well for Israel over time. Right now, the Biden-Harris team gave Bibi just enough of a green light to go take out Iran's radar stations and the S-300 anti-aircraft missile defense system around Tehran and around the missile or around the nuclear sites. I wish that, Israel had been given the green light to do more, but I think Netanyahu wisely took that with the Biden-Harris blessing, as it were. They weren't happy about it, but they tacitly accepted that. And that clears the path for it clears the path for a much larger and more decisive strike. And I know the Iranian regime is vulnerable. If Netanyahu is told by Trump, let me negotiate, well, he's got to get a Secretary of State chosen, confirmed. He's got to build a team. That's a negotiation. And then a deal also legitimizes the regime in Iran, because you're negotiating with a regime that you're basically saying, we won't decapitate you the way Israel just decapitated the Hezbollah terror organization and the Hamas terror organization. Again, going after Iran in a big way could cause, massive damage here in Israel. So we don't do this lightly. I'm just saying, there's a risk. There's a risk for the United States. There's a risk for Israel and for the Sunni Arabs if you don't use military force now in a bigger way. On the other hand, if there's a huge risk if you do use it and Iran goes crazy and launches 3,000 ballistic missiles at us and our Arab allies and at American forces and unleashes terror sleeper cells in the United States and Europe and where else. So anyway, lots of challenges. And that's another reason that Christians need to stay engaged. We need to be praying for wisdom for Trump, for Vance, for their team, and of course for Netanyahu, and of course a whole new defense minister. You and I do not have time to cover that right now, but firing his defense minister on Tuesday night, right in the middle of this challenging moment, was. I expected him to do it at some point. I predicted that he would do it, but I didn't expect it Tuesday night. So, all right, last point though. what should Israelis, what should Christians really be watching for in terms of the Saudis and the Israelis? Do you see any concerns with this Saudi deal, what they're asking for from the United States, what they're asking for from Israel, right? They're asking for a Palestinian state, or at least a pathway to a Palestinian state. No Israeli, even on the far left, I'm not aware anybody has an appetite to have that conversation right now. So just in a few moments, a minute or two as we wrap, what is your sense of how quickly a deal could be finalized between the Saudis, the Americans, and Israel?
Well, if left to our own without other considerations, we could sign a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia tomorrow, and with the United States actually overseeing a new alliance here between all the Sunni countries and Israel, making the United States really to a prosperous area for free trade and investments and technology transfer. You know that the major, challenge for the Middle East is food security and water availability. This is also a great glue that keeps the Arab countries to Israel, and we can do a lot together. So yes, the Saudis have stipulated that they need to see a path to a Palestinian state in order to normalize relations with Israel, in order to create a new economic sphere, which will be shared by all the countries here. This is something that, of course, we will have to consider very seriously. I would say that without actually any preconditions, before we go into any path, we cannot precondition, that would be the path, that would be the outcome of a Palestinian state, that would be the contour of the states. No, it has to be negotiated. But clearest thing that we need, and I think here the United States is with us all together, and certainly Trump, is that if we move forward and we are trading concessions with the Palestinians, one thing has to be assured, that the Palestinian society is A, demilitarized, and B, de-radicalized.
Yes.
And accept Israel as a legitimate state, understanding that we are here in our home and in our own homeland, as was actually decreed by Almighty, the God of Israel and the God of all of us.
Amen. Fascinating. What a fascinating conversation. I'm so grateful to you, Ambassador Danny Ione, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Not an easy job to have at any time, but you did it so well. You were also the deputy foreign minister for the state of Israel. And and you've been a dear friend, you and your family, to Lynn and me, and helping us become new Israeli citizens 10 years ago. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. And it's just, we're very, very grateful to you and your wisdom and insights. And thank you so much for coming on Inside the Epicenter today.
Thank you, Josh, and God bless.
I'm Joel Rosenberg. On your left, you'll find some videos we've chosen specifically for you. We look forward to partnering with you to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus.